But when I'm thinking of second brain, I'm thinking about where can I just store all this? We get bombarded with so much information on a daily basis. Like it's difficult to hold it all in your head. Your brain gets saturated at some point, and you want to take it out of your head and dump it into this second brain.
Welcome to the Kingspiration Podcast. This is the place where you'll learn how to get unstuck and gain momentum in your life and business. Each week, we tackle the real aspects of entrepreneurship, personal development, relationships, and fitness. I'm your co-host, Ethan King, from Atlanta, Georgia, USA, entrepreneur, TEDx speaker, and best-selling author of Wealth Beyond Money.
And I'm your co-host, Justin King, no relation to Ethan, from Cape Town, South Africa, entrepreneur, speaker, and business growth strategist. Our journey crosses continents and cultures, sharing wisdom and experiences to propel you forward. Welcome to Kingspiration. Let's start the conversation.
All right, so I am reading the book Building a Second Brain by Tiago Forte because I struggle with where to store information. Like when I take notes at learning events and or just thoughts that I have or journaling, like I have things written down by hand in different books. And then I have some things stored in my Apple Notes on my phone. And then I have some things stored in Google Drive because I can't store things like docs and spreadsheets and slideshows in Apple Notes. And then where do I organize it all? I primarily use Trello to try to organize my thoughts and projects because I like the Kanban style side by side. But I still feel like I'm using so many different types of softwares. And then you have the handwritten stuff as well. So what I'm trying to do is get it all in one place so that I can easily search and find things, which is why I picked up the book, Building a Second Brain, and also got that's what it's called, the tablet, Remarkable, for my birthday, because everyone I know who has one swears by it. So what we want to talk about today is like, how do you organize? Where are you with organizing your thoughts and your notes? And then where do you want to go with that? So that's kind of where I am, Justin. What about you?
Yeah, the Building a Second Brain is an interesting one. So I haven't read the book, and I was actually just trying to look for a link here specifically while you were speaking. But I haven't yet read the book. But Tiago Forte is somebody who's been on my radar for some time, and I certainly was not an early adopter of Notion, but Notion has been around for some time, and trying to dig a little bit deeper into understanding how to use Notion. Tiago Forte, I came across him really early, and I built out a bit of a database just for our business back then around how to structure the note taking just within Notion for our business, and the para method that he outlines. So going into a little bit of detail there, but so that's where I first heard the concept of second brain, and that was particularly for work. But I'm more interested in, and I know there's overlap between work and personal; it's all blurred. But I then had this idea in my head that I absolutely needed a second brain to rule my life, a second brain for anything interesting that I read, anything interesting that I heard. Where was this all going to go? And I think I've had those best of intentions to build a second brain for about the last 6 years. And and it just hasn't materialized. So I love the concept. Whether I think it's for everyone, I'm not too sure. So that's where I am on it at the moment.
Yeah. So you brought up the para method, and para, PARA, stands for projects, areas, resources, and archives. So it's interesting because I've started kind of doing this with this new Trello board that I created to help manage projects between me and my new virtual assistant who's in the Philippines. And it's interesting when you bring somebody brand new into your life who knows nothing about you, then it forces you to organize your thoughts in your life in a visual way that someone else can understand it. And it's been kind of a jumbled mess in my head because I have so many things going on. So in a way, I've kind of accidentally done this para method in this new Trello board. So what I did was, in Trello, you have a series of lists. So then I named each list a different area of my life. So like, for example, I have a list for stuff for Greeks. I have a list for Zeus's Closet. I have a list for my speaking engagements and books and things like that. have a list for Simple Success School. I even have a list for some of the volunteer work that I do with EO. And then under each list, I have projects that relate to that particular topic. So anytime an email comes in, if it's related to a certain project, then it goes on that card in that particular list. And then I've also started like some cards that have to do with tasks for my VA to do. And then the cool thing about Trello is you can click on it, and then on the back of a card, like for example, I have one thing that I'm gonna have my VA doing is replying to sales inquiries emails, like when people want quotes. So on the back of the card, it has instructions for her on how to do that. And have that kind of for each area of my life. I have these projects, and some of them are long-term projects, some of them are short-term, and some of them are just recurring daily tasks or recurring weekly tasks, things like that. I think I'm on the right path with this, but I'm not 100% finished with the book yet. We also have a speaker coming to EO next month. Scott Novus is going to teach us on this. So
Amazing.
I'll keep you updated on how it's working.
But do you think, so the question I've got for you there, Ethan, do you think that, so I love everything that you've outlined, but do you think that's not more like productivity and task management? Or because when I think of second brain, I think of, and I think that's absolutely a use case. But when I'm thinking of second brain, I'm thinking about where can I just store all this? We get bombarded with so much information on a daily basis. Like it's difficult to hold it all in your head. Your brain gets saturated at some point, and you want to take it out of your head and dump it into this second brain. So I absolutely get that managing tasks for sure. I know I would stay awake at night sometimes because I'm thinking about tasks that I need to write down somewhere, things that I need to get across the line. So I love what you're saying there. But how do you use it purely just from storing of information? So simplest example, having a really rad quote that you come across. You're like, man, I'm going to use that in a talk one day, or I just want to have access to it. Have you figured out a way to store that type of information yet?
Yeah, see, okay, so this is the problem, because what I just described in Trello is project and task management. Yeah, you brought up a great example about quotes. So for some reason, I happen to I have a note in my phone, and it's probably on my phone because I always have my phone with me. But whenever a cool quote pops in my head, or if I hear a quote from someone else, I put it in this quotes document. Or if I think of a cool quote, then I put it in the quotes document. I just cite myself as the author of that quote. But I can always go to quotes in my phone and find this whole list. But that's not in. So I guess in a way, it's in two different places, right? Because it's not in this Trello. But I guess that's okay, because our brain does project management, and it also just stores random information as well. So it's different parts of the brain, I would imagine. And so I guess maybe your second brain can consist of, maybe I just need to be okay with having like 3 different softwares where I store things depending on what they are.
I think so. And I think the big step that you have taken now, and I would love to get my hands on one as well, is getting the Remarkable. Because that would be the one. So, and like you were saying to me earlier, you've got multiple notepads or notebooks. You're just grabbing one, whichever one's closest at the moment. And I tend to do the same. So getting that digitized and into some sort of searchable format, I think that's a game changer. So if you had Trello, you had Apple Notes, and you had Remarkable, which would potentially just pull through to Trello. I'm pretty sure that it auto syncs and you'd be able to connect it through. Then I think that's quite a good, let's call it a little brain ecosystem, if nothing else. And I kind of do the same. So there's essentially three tools that I use to capture all these thoughts, elements, articles, quotes, whatever it is. And we've mentioned 2 of them on a very early episode before. The one is Readwise. The other one is Snipd, and then the third is Notion. And so the way that I use Readwise is when you're reading any books, you can highlight content, and that automatically gets saved, your highlighted sections. But Readwise also has an amazing tool where once you've got it on your phone or in your browser, any article that you come across, you can highlight text in an article and it saves to Readwise. If you come across a quote, if you highlight it, it can save to Readwise. When I'm reading newsletters that I subscribe to, sections of newsletters, I can highlight and then also save into to Readwise. And every time I'm doing that, I'm able to tag it. But Readwise itself is becoming this great repository of content that I've consumed while reading. Let's put it that way. And then that auto pulls through to a Notion table where I can allocate it. So that's the one aspect. And then Snip. That the main two places that I consume content are reading and podcasts. And then Snipd is for podcasts. And again, you're able to snip certain sections of a podcast, hitting a button, and it saves essentially a minute long. You can edit how long you want that to be, and then it transcribes it. And again, that can auto link through to Notion, which pulls through to a table. And then lastly, I've also just got Apple Notes that I use. So I don't feel that I necessarily want to build a really intricate second brain, because I struggle to perfect that. But I just want to know that when I come across something, I'm sending it somewhere that I'll be able to search it for at some stage. And with some basic tagging, I'm getting that right. I've tried to alleviate. So you know what, the anxiety that building a robust second brain gave me was the fact that if I've built the second brain, does that mean I have to be saving anything and everything? That's what I got that into my head at some stage. I was like, what, you got a second brain? That means anything that's interesting, you've got to be snipping this and taking that and making sure that gets saved. And you heard somebody say this, and that's going to be sent there. And have you tagged it correctly? And I found it quite overwhelming from that point of view. So now it's just the stuff that really sticks out to me. I want to make sure that gets sent somewhere. It's searchable, so it's not just sitting in a notebook. So this is my problem at the moment. I've still got things on paper. I'd like to move away, but send it somewhere that's searchable. And then one of the best things, the advice, I'm going to call it advice, that really set me free from all of this is the one line: the important shit will stick. When you're listening to a podcast or reading a book or reading an article, we can become so overwhelmed now with taking incredible notes. But very often, like the really important stuff, the stuff that matters, that's the piece of spaghetti that sticks against the wall, and you'll be able to recall it. And the habit that I've got myself into is I'm backing my first brain at the moment. And the stuff that sticks, generally what I'm trying to do now is I'm trying to share it with somebody or teach it to somebody as quickly as possible after I hear it. And that has been a game changer for me. Sorry, I've gone on a bit of a rant and a tangent, but that's second brain, first brain, teach, man, that's been a game changer for me.
Yeah. So while you were talking about Readwise and Snipd and things like that, those tools, I was doing a little research, and you can of course sync those to things like Google Drive, Notion, Obsidian. So if you do have this second brain, and Obsidian just keeps coming up, I think that's what we're going to learn about at the EO event. But I guess if you point all of these things, your Readwise and your Snipd and stuff in your notes to the one place, then you can always go and just search it. And it's something about linking. You can link things, so you can see like connecting thoughts in these networks. So that's the evolution of where I want to take it. Digitizing all the handwritten stuff, getting it in there. And I do think it can get pretty nerve-wracking to think, oh, I got to put everything in this second brain. But I guess it could benefit you. You know, it's almost like we talked about the idea trap. Yeah. Like when I'm out for a run or I'm in the shower, those awesome ideas come to me. I don't want to forget them. So I got to figure out some kind of way. And I generally go to Apple Notes for this. I try to get it. I'll stop in the middle of a run and just put notes into my phone so I don't forget it. And I have a lot of gems, like a lot of great ideas have come out of doing that. So I do think it's good to trap those great ideas somewhere. And eventually, if it ends up in your second brain, great, because then you might be able to link that with a book that you read or something that you heard on a podcast. And it's when those ideas kind of cross-pollinate, that's when you can create something pretty massive.
So what do you think is an easy first step into using a second brain? The first thought that comes to mind for me, and I'd love to hear your take on it, is I think actually choose an area of your life that you want to trial it in or start using it for. because that's what I found overwhelming. Is I thought about, okay, well, am I going to use it for health and fitness and food and work and project management and tasks and speaking and anything and everything? Whereas where I actually ended up focusing on as a starting point was anything that I thought would be interesting to put in keynotes. So anything that stuck out for me from that point of view, and anything that would really add value to the facilitations that I do with clients. I started there. And once I got the hang of that and found a method that worked for me there, then I kind of expanded on to bringing a few other elements into it. But I just chose one area of my life, anything that was essentially to do with presenting content. And that's where I started. I didn't want to miss out on the little gems that I was finding reading books and in podcasts. And that's where I started. So that made it a lot easier for me to kind of step over the threshold to actually get started before just trying to build it out into this, what in my mind was an absolute beast.
Yeah, I think you can get caught up in what the different softwares, right? But at the end of the day, it's more about the organization, because you just mentioned different areas, right? Which is the first A, is projects, areas, resources, archives.
Yeah.
So then, I mean, I get, if you think about it that way. So we talked about the projects, and I use Trello for that. What do you use for project management?
Microsoft Teams. So we use essentially Planner in Microsoft.
Okay. And then the areas. So you got to have some way to organize those different areas. So if you have, like, I do the same thing. Like, one area would be keynotes and public speaking. When I get ideas that I want to put into that area, right now I go to my notes on my phone again, because I usually have it with me. So I think that's the key thing. Like, I have a note for just those ideas, and then I'll organize it into like my Google Drive folder where I have my keynotes, things like that. But I do think that it's key to have it organized like that. And then you have the R, which is resources. So your resources could be where you keep the books that you've read, or well, not the entire book, but the notes from books that you've read, notes from podcasts, things that have jumped out on Snipd, Readwise, notes that you've taken at a conference or something. That would all go into your resources. And then archives is where you put things like completed projects. You just kind of store them away, so you can always refer back to them, but they're not like in your face, taking up mental space.
Yeah. The one last thing that I think I'll add to this is that I really think that complicated, well-structured second brains, not for everybody. And I think I'm one of those people. I get the barrier to entry, the effort that it takes to get to that point where I've understood it and I've structured it correctly, and the anxiety it will provoke if I haven't got it right is just too much of a barrier to entry for me. So keeping it simple absolutely works for me. We both have a good friend, Richard Mulholland. He goes deep into second brains, and he loves the idea, and he'll use the different tools and the different platforms, and really he masters the craft of it. So that's really interesting how good he is at tagging everything. And then on the other side of the spectrum, and this is proof that I don't want to say in order to be successful, that's a terrible line, but it's proof that individuals that have had access to huge amounts of information have chosen not to use a second brain intentionally. And Tim Ferriss, he's one of the grandfathers of podcasting these days. I think he first started over 10 years ago, over 1 billion downloads. I heard him speaking the other day about the fact that he still uses Evernote. He hasn't gone deep into a second brain. He still uses Evernote. And Chris Williamson, Modern Wisdom podcast, over 700 episodes, one of the fastest growing podcasts in the world, Apple Notes, and he swears by it. Tags things well, says it's searchable, and he has never lost or missed anything that he was looking for. So I think that the main outcome is use something and then just use it well. Like, don't overcomplicate it. Use something, use it well.
Yep. Well, I think that's a great place to end. Thanks, Justin.
Yeah, amazing. Ethan, a pleasure as always.
That's a wrap for today's episode of Kingspiration. We hope this conversation sparked insights to ignite action in your life and business.
We're on this journey together, sharing our challenges and successes to help all of us take the next step towards building momentum and ultimately reaching our goals.
If you found value in today's episode, please share it with someone else who might benefit and leave us a 5-star review.
And remember to hit subscribe so you don't miss out on our weekly conversations. Until next time, keep rolling, keep growing, and keep being inspired.